Our next guest was a Heisman Trophy finalist. He's been a college football analyst. He was a first-round pick in the NFL. Joining us here on the show, Joey Harrington. Joey, good morning. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks so much for joining us. And now that we have our college football playoff set, let's ask some questions about it. Number one, did you believe that the committee got it right putting LSU number one ahead of Ohio State?
Yes-ish. No, probably. Kind of flip a coin. I mean, I say it doesn't matter because they are 1A and 1B, LSU and Ohio State. But it does matter because it determines who plays Clemson. And I think that's really the only thing at issue here. Look, I mean, both of those teams were tremendous throughout the entire year. And you could make an argument either way. The strength of Ohio State's schedule at the end of the season, playing 3 top 15 teams back to back to back. The way that Joe Burrow took LSU, which has been such a defensive team, the team that wins games 14-9, and all of a sudden they're putting up 40 points a game, and he's going to win the Heisman Trophy. It does matter, but I think either way they got it right.
Because also on Championship Saturday, I mean, you had LSU have no problem in their game, and then you did see Ohio State fall behind by 2 touchdowns, 21-7. That kind of has to factor in, right?
Well, yeah, and I have to think that was probably the deciding factor. That last glimpse that the committee had at both of those teams. And what you saw was Ohio State come storming back in the second half, but you saw another dominant performance by LSU against, a Georgia team that was trying to make an argument to get into that playoff. So, if I had to make the decision, I would put LSU 1. But you could make an argument to me that OSU or Ohio State deserved it, and, I'd probably accept that argument as well.
Joey Harrington joins us here on CBS Sports Radio. There is an argument to be had about how tough Oregon's schedule was and whether ultimately that hurt them this year. They, of course, ended up winning the Pac-12 championship, but scheduled with a 9-game conference schedule, unlike the SEC, tremendously difficult neutral site game against Auburn. Do you think that it would be worthy of saying, you know what, Oregon deserves consideration, even though they have 2 losses because of the difficulty of the schedule?
No, I don't. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to win. Looking back, would you like to say, sure, let's erase that Auburn game and, schedule a cupcake that can come in and notch another win. But, let's examine, what you could control. And what you could control is a 2-touchdown lead in the second half in a neutral site game against an Auburn team that was very good this year. And had they won it, had they pulled it off at the end, I think that would have been the deciding factor to get them into the playoff. And even with that loss, they were in position to do it. I mean, let's not forget that it wasn't the Auburn game that kept them out. If anything, I think the Auburn game would have helped them had they just won out the rest of their conference schedule. It happens every year. I mean, you can go back like clockwork, and in November every single year there is a team that looks like they're headed on the path to postseason playoff or BCS or whatever it is throughout the years. Whether it's Oklahoma State and Brandon Whedon and Justin Blackman losing to Iowa State there at the end of the year, or whether it's Oregon this year losing to Arizona State. It happens. And so I don't look at the Auburn game so much as I do at the Arizona State game, where they just got bit. And that happens to 18, 19-year-old kids after you've been playing for 10, 11, 12, 13 weeks in a row, and you're getting tired of being the guy that's hunted every single week.
Would you rather see all the Power 5 conferences go to 9 conference games?
I think it would make it easy. I think everybody would be on an even playing field. I mean, I can't tell you how ridiculous it is that the SEC plays Norfolk State and southwestern Louisiana in the middle of November. I mean, I think it's a joke. And I think it's something that most of the college football world has either resigned to accept or doesn't want to talk about. I mean, I think that's an absolute joke that they schedule those games in November when everybody else is finishing up their conference season. The SEC just gets to take a break. I think you need a consistent playing field for everybody. But at the same time, I mean, you have that argument. Honestly, I think what solves the problem for everybody is you go to an 8-team playoff. And what you do is you take the winners of all the 5 conferences, and you take the winner of or the highest ranked group of 5 team, and then you've got 2 at-large spots. So you can eliminate that argument. Do you take a second SEC team? You eliminate the argument of, well, does Penn State deserve to get in this year, or whatever that second Big Ten team was. I mean, it's a situation. It's interesting living here on the West Coast. The Rose Bowl was always what you looked forward to. But it's interesting that the playoff has somewhat diminished what is, the granddaddy of all bowl games. What was the pinnacle of Pac-12 or Pac-10 and Big Ten football? You're on the quest for the playoff all year, and you lose a game to Arizona State, and all of a sudden it's like, well, I guess we're going to go to the Rose Bowl. And if you bring in an 8-team playoff and you make it so that the Pac-12 champion goes to the Rose Bowl and plays keep both of the best of both worlds. You keep the playoff, but you also keep the importance of the Rose Bowl. I mean, these are all talk about, say, in a vacuum, but whether it's having all conferences play 9 conference games or expanding the playoff to 8 teams. But the reality is you've got too much money banked into around the country that it's going to be extremely difficult to make any sort of change any time in the near future.
No doubt. Joey Harrington joining us this morning here on CBS Sports Radio and Sunday Morning Football. As a former quarterback yourself, tell me what you are seeing from Joe Burrow, because he has been nearly flawless this season, and he might have 2 more games left. This is one of the most magical quarterback seasons that we've seen in a long time. What are you seeing from Joe?
It's kind of a combination of a lot of things. It's the evolution of college football, right? Combined with a guy, I think last year's experience helped him so much. Helped him learn when to take risks, when to force the ball, when to check it down, when to rely on guys who are just unbelievably talented, when to rely on his defense. I remember taking the experience from a previous year and turning it into, or applying it to the game field the next year. And I think you're seeing the evolution of college football combined with a guy who's just done an incredible job of getting better and doing it in a place that was so ready for an offensive explosion. Joe Burrow was I want to say he was perfect, but he was magical from the start of this season, and deserves every accolade that comes his way.
And with that, how difficult is it to have done what he did, transferring and then having this type of season in that conference? You know the degree of difficulty that it takes to do this. How difficult is it what he has accomplished?
Well, let me try to say. You've seen guys have success like this. Tua. You've seen guys let's go back through the years, whether it's, the Danny Werfel or the Steve Spurrier offenses of Florida. Jalen Hurts or Tua Tagovailoa at Alabama, more recently. You've seen these offensive explosions. I think part of it is Joe, but I think also part of it is Coach O accepting or being willing to go out and say, let's score some points, right? Let's get away from this idea of we are a defensive Leonard Fournette-driven type of football team and saying, we're going to chuck it around like the rest of college football. Look, I had the pleasure of playing for Coach Orgeron when I was in New Orleans, and he was the defensive line coach there. And I was around him, and I saw what he could do with his players, and I saw what he could do in the way he connected to guys. And if you can take that connection and say, you know what, trust me on this. I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to go outside of what has been LSU's box, and I'm going to score some points. And I'm going to bring in these offensive minds, and we're going to score some points. And do that with guys that believe in you. Yes, Joe has done an incredible job this year, and you had to have the right guy to do it. But I think a lot of the credit belongs with Coach Orgeron as well, and his willingness to step out of what has been a consistent winning formula for LSU and say, I'm going to do things differently in this conference.
I think you're absolutely right. Orgeron has been phenomenal in adjusting and not really having an ego throughout all this stuff. He doesn't need all of the credit or the accomplishment. He's letting everybody else have that, and that says a lot about him. Joey Harrington joining us here on CBS Sports Radio. I would also encourage all of our listeners to check out more information about the Harrington Family Foundation by going to harringtonfamilyfoundation.org. Joey started this more than a decade and a half ago. It's a nonprofit where they are looking for leaders and helping develop leaders and mentoring leaders in the state for students across the state of Oregon. And it's a really special place where there's a lot of special things being done. harringtonfamilyfoundation.org. Joey, it is always wonderful to catch up, my man. Thanks so much for doing it with us today. This was great.
My pleasure. Anytime.